Listen, I need to talk. Emily lowered the book onto her lap, but kept her finger tucked between the pages, right at the line where she'd left off. An old habit, a tiny anchor. She lifted her gaze to her husband. Jacob hadn't settled beside her on the couch as he usually did. He was standing in the no-man's land between the armchair and the coffee table, shifting his weight from one foot to the other in an awkward, restless shuffle. That little dance of his was a dead giveaway, a silent alarm bell. This conversation was going to be unpleasant. He was studying the grain of the hardwood floor as if the script for this discussion were etched there in the oak, something he had to decipher and stumble through. The entire evening shifted in an instant. The warm, buttery glow from the floor lamp, which just a moment ago had felt cozy and intimate, now seemed harsh, interrogative, spotlighting every flicker of his anxiety. "I'm listening, Jacob. Did something happen?" No, nothing's wrong." He finally forced himself to look at her, but his eyes darted away almost immediately, fixing on a bookshelf. "It's just, my parents, we were talking the other day, about us, about our future, about how the bedrock of a strong marriage is total, absolute transparency, a complete merging of assets, like a foundation." His words came out in ragged pieces, as if he were hauling them up from a deep, dark well. Emily remained silent, letting him dredge up whatever he'd been hiding down there. She could feel the trajectory of this talk already, that carefully measured tone, the strategic invocation of his parents. It was all a preamble to something rehearsed, something that sat uncomfortably in his own mouth. "And they feel, and honestly, I've come to agree, that it would be the right thing to do, symbolic, you know?" He took a deep, ragged breath, like a man about to plunge into icy water. "Maybe we should put the condo in my name, you know, so everything is truly ours, so they can see we're serious, that we're a single unit." He blurted it out and then clamped his mouth shut, bracing for impact. For an explosion, for tears, for wounded fury, anything. But Emily didn't move. She just watched him. For a long, suspended moment. Her gaze was calm, almost clinically curious. She wasn't seeing her husband anymore. She was seeing a bad actor struggling with a poorly written, borrowed script. "A merged asset means everyone has a share," she said, and her voice cut through the thick silence with unexpected steel. "What you're proposing is for everything to become yours. Do I understand your symbolic gesture correctly?" Jacob flinched as if she'd slapped him. "What are you even saying? Mine? It would be ours. We're a family. Don't you trust me?" Trust is when you don't ask someone to sign a document that strips them of their only home, Jacob. That's not my line. Bedrock of a marriage, foundation of trust, that's your mother's vocabulary. You don't talk like that. So let's be clear, was this her idea? He flushed. An ugly, mottled red crawled up his neck. Busted. She had pinpointed the epicenter of this clumsy scheme. His silence was louder than any confession. He just stood there, caught in the act, his initial embarrassment rapidly hardening into stubborn irritation. "What's wrong with listening to my parents? They're older, wiser, they want what's stable for us, and you immediately assume there's some ulterior motive." Emily slowly closed her book. She wouldn't need the bookmark. The evening was ruined, and with it, the fragile illusion of so many other things that now lay shattered and obvious. "The ulterior motive I see is that your wise parents are proposing to strengthen your family by absorbing my real estate. Mine, Jacob. It was mine before you, and it will remain mine. You can tell them their brilliant plan didn't work. This conversation is over." The next day passed in a silence so thick you could choke on it. Jacob made a theatrical show of ignoring her, burying himself in his phone or staring blankly at the TV, weaving a cocoon of sulky, silent reproach around himself. He was waiting for her to crack, to approach him, to start justifying herself. Emily, meanwhile, moved through the condo with a methodical calm, and this precise, unruffled normality infuriated him far more than any screaming match could have. She knew the first approach had just been a scouting mission. She wasn't wrong. That evening, as she was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, her phone, lying on the counter, began to vibrate. The screen lit up. Sharon. Emily glanced at Jacob, who was planted on the living room couch, pretending to be engrossed in a muted news broadcast. He didn't turn, but she saw the muscles in his back tense. He knew. The second act of their domestic drama was beginning. Emily swiped the screen and tapped the speakerphone button. "Emily, sweetheart, hello. Am I interrupting?" Her mother-in-law's voice dripped with a honeyed warmth that Emily knew always contained a hidden spoonful of vinegar. "Good evening, Sharon. No, you're not." "How are you two? Our Jacob called earlier. He sounded so upset. A mother's heart knows. You can't fool it. I knew right away something was off between you." Emily silently continued dicing a bell pepper. The knife hit the cutting board with a steady, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. She wasn't going to help her mother-in-law navigate through these hypocritical pleasantries. Let her find her own way to the point. "He told me about your little chat last night," Sharon continued after a pause, the honey in her voice beginning to curdle. "To be perfectly honest, I was at a loss for words. Emily, we welcomed you as our own daughter. We only want what's best, a real, strong family unit. And your reaction was so—" The knife stilled. Emily wiped her hands on a towel and leaned against the countertop. "So what, Sharon?" "Well, hostile, as if we're your adversaries, as if we want to steal something from you. But this is about a simple gesture of unity. In my day, a wife joined her husband's life. Everything went into the common pot. No one was keeping score of who owned what on paper, because there was trust. So, are you saying you have no faith in our boy? You think he'd ever deceive you, leave you with nothing?" It was a classic flanking maneuver. Induce guilt, paint her as a distrustful, selfish woman, and frame herself and her son as paragons of wounded virtue. Emily looked toward the living room. Jacob was sunk into the couch cushions, staring unseeingly at the dark, blank TV he'd turned off long ago. He knew. He was complicit. The second act of their domestic drama was beginning. "Sharon, trust is something you don't demand to be notarized by making someone propertyless, and a common pot works when both people are putting something into it. Jacob moved in with me, into my condo. That was my contribution. What contribution is he offering, aside from the idea of transferring my property to his name?" A heavy pause stretched over the line. The mother-in-law clearly hadn't anticipated this cold, almost legalistic dismantling of her argument. She was used to emotions, which were malleable and easier to twist. "You sound like a stranger right now, Emily, like a real estate agent. This isn't about square footage. It's about the relationship. It's about a man feeling like the head of the household, the provider. How can he feel that way if he's essentially a guest in his wife's home? It's emasculating. We're thinking of his dignity, of your family's future, and you're reducing it all to money." "And my dignity doesn't factor in?" Emily parried calmly. "The fact that I'm supposed to hand over the fruit of my parents' labor and my own work as some sort of trust collateral, that's acceptable to you?" Sharon let out a heavy, dramatic sigh into the receiver. Her patience was a thinning veneer. "Well, it's your decision, Emily. You can't build a marriage on suspicion. A good wife thinks of her husband and her future children, not her personal equity. Apparently, we failed to instill that in you." "You never had anything to instill in me, Sharon," Emily cut in, switching off the speakerphone and pressing the device to her ear. The intimate, harsh whisper was for her alone. "Have a good evening." She ended the call. The kitchen was quiet again, save for the low hum of the refrigerator. She looked at Jacob. He hadn't moved. He hadn't stood up, hadn't come to her defense, hadn't said a word, not for her, not for himself. He just sat there in his silent collusion. And that silence was louder and more terrifying than all of his mother's manipulative words. It was a full, unequivocal endorsement. When she set the phone down on the counter, the quality of the silence in the condo changed. It was no longer thick and passive. Now it was a high-tension wire, vibrating, ready to snap at any second. Emily waited. She knew that now, with her mother's mission a failure, he would have to re-enter the fray himself. And he did. Jacob heaved himself up from the couch, the movement laborious, as if he were pulling himself out of quicksand. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, blocking the exit. His face was dark, and his eyes, usually soft, held a cold, naked anger. The mask of the loving husband was gone. "Are you happy now?" His voice was flat, stripped of all warmth. "You upset my mother. She only wanted to help. She came from a place of love, and you made her out to be some kind of con artist." Emily turned slowly to face him. She didn't raise her voice, but her gaze turned to flint. "I upset her? Are you serious, Jacob? Your mother called to pressure me where you failed. She called me selfish and accused me of distrust because I won't hand over my condo to you. And after that, you're telling me I upset her? Isn't it true? You don't trust me or my family. We're just a bunch of strangers to you, a gang plotting to rob you blind." He took a step forward, invading the bubble of her personal space. His indignation was so sincere it was almost pathetic. He genuinely believed his own narrative. "You've always been like this," he spat out, bitterness twisting his features. "Calculating, always looking out for number one, for your own advantage. I thought marriage would change you, that you'd understand what a real family means, but you're clinging to your concrete box like it's the only thing you have." And that's when the dam broke. Not with a scream, not with tears, but with a murderously calm, furious lucidity. She looked him directly in the eyes, right into the pupils, and spoke the words that had been circling in her mind for hours. "So, let me get this straight. You and your parents decided I should sign my condo over to you so that later, if things go south, I'd be left with nothing? Did you all get your script mixed up? Go buy another place yourselves and put that in anyone's name you want." He recoiled as if physically struck. That blunt, crude articulation of their scheme disarmed him completely. He had expected tears, accusations, hurt, not this precise, clinical autopsy of their intent. You're twisting everything," he finally yelled, his composure shattering. "That's not what this is about. It's about investment. Everyone has to invest in the family. What have you invested?" "I invested myself, my time, my life, my space." Her voice rang with a fury she no longer contained. "I let you into my home, into my world, and you decided that wasn't enough. You decided you needed to take the home too. Well, here's a newsflash, Jacob. Investment is a two-way street. Trying to take what belongs to someone else isn't an investment. It's theft." He stared at her, and in his eyes she saw no remorse, no love, only the frustration of a botched operation. He wasn't angry for hurting her. He was angry that she had proven harder to manipulate than they'd estimated. And in that moment, Emily knew her husband was gone. In his place stood a stranger, a greedy man wearing Jacob's face. Arguing with him was pointless. He fell silent, breathing heavily. The air in the kitchen was now charged, crackling with the static of their dead future. All their shared life, the smiles, the lazy Sunday mornings, the inside jokes, had collapsed into the ugly, narrow dimensions of this argument over square footage and ownership. Emily looked at him, but she no longer saw her spouse. The anger that had boiled in her a minute ago receded, leaving behind a hollow, icy calm. It was as if she were observing him through soundproof glass, studying the behavior of an unfamiliar and rather crude specimen. She was no longer a participant in this fight. She was an audience of one. She slowly walked past him, careful not to make contact, and moved into the living room. Jacob remained standing in the kitchen, bewildered by her sudden withdrawal. He'd been braced for another round, for more shouting, but she had simply disengaged. He followed her, ready to reignite the conflict, but Emily sat down in the armchair, the same one she'd been reading in the night before, and looked up at him. Her expression was utterly composed, almost indifferent. "You know, Jacob, I've finally figured it out," she said quietly, each word landing with the weight of a verdict. "I was sitting here thinking, how did I miss this? It's so simple, really." He tensed, not following her line of thought. "What are you talking about? You're not making any sense." "This isn't your parents talking, Jacob. This is your family's business plan." She said it not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact, like someone reading a financial disclosure. It's genius in its own simple way. Step 1, marry a woman who owns her condo. Step 2, emotionally manipulate her, convince her everything must be shared. Use the parents for added pressure, lean on family values. Step 3, once the asset is transferred, well, options open up. Nothing personal, just a shrewd merger. He stared at her, his face contorting. He wanted to protest, to scream that she was wrong, but the words died in his throat. Because she was right. She had voiced their plan with such cynical, brutal accuracy that denial was impossible. What insane nonsense is that? Have you lost your mind?" It was all he could muster, a pathetic, predictable retort. Emily gave a cold, humorless smile. "No, I've just come to my senses. A little late, but better late than never, don't you think?" She rose from the chair and walked toward him until they were almost nose to nose. He instinctually took a step back. "So you can report back to your parents, your partners in this brilliant startup, that their plan has failed. The investor is pulling out of the project." She paused, letting the finality of her words sink into the charged air between them. Then she added, her eyes locked on his, "And she's taking her primary asset with her, herself." After saying that, she turned on her heel and walked silently toward the bedroom. Jacob was left standing in the middle of the living room, crushed and hollowed out. He didn't know what to do next. He had lost. He heard the closet door in the bedroom open and close. He waited for her to emerge with a suitcase, but she didn't. A minute later, Emily returned to the living room. In her arms was a set of clean bed linens, a pillow and a fresh case, and a neatly folded duvet inside its cover. She didn't throw them, she didn't hurl. Then she turned and walked back to the bedroom without another word. The door didn't slam, it clicked shut, soft and final. Jacob stared at that solitary, folded duvet on the couch, and the understanding slowly dawned on him. This wasn't the end of a fight. This was the end of everything. What would you have done in Emily's shoes? Could you see the signs earlier, or do these scenarios always blindside us? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. These discussions are what make our community so valuable. And if you're finding this deep dive into human dynamics compelling, consider subscribing to the channel for more explorations of the unspoken rules and hidden conflicts in our everyday lives. Disclaimer: all events depicted in this story and the names of the characters are fictional.